Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, last week, we picked up where Krishna had rescued 16,100 young princesses who had been put into captivity by Bauma Asura. And Krishna had to kill, first of all, the Mura, or five-headed demon. Therefore, Krishna's name, Murari. And then Krishna dealt with Bauma Asura. And then Mother Earth, she offered prayers to Krishna. And she asked Krishna to please give fearlessness to the son of Bauma Asura. And so he was installed as king, and Krishna blessed him. And then Krishna went to see the 16,100 young princesses who had been kidnapped by Bauma Asura. And when Krishna rescued them, they looked at Krishna. And the way Prabhupada explained it once, Krishna said, "Well, what do you want?" And the girls responded, "Well, since we have been held captive, the custom is that nobody will now accept us as their wives because we have been out of our home for a night or more." Actually been a long time, but the Vedic culture was so strict at that time that if a young girl was absent from home, even for one night, then no respectable person would agree to marry such a girl. So under the circumstances, Krishna asked the princes, "What do you want?" And they indicated that since you rescued us and nobody else will have us, then you have to marry us. And the way Prabhupada explained it on the tape, Prabhupada said, Krishna said, "Come on, let's go." And so Krishna took the 16,100 young princesses, married them all at one time in Dwaraka, added to the previous 8 queens. Now Krishna has the requisite number of only 16,100 wives, 108 wives, that's all. Because Krishna is Ananta, Krishna is unlimited. So even if Krishna has 16 quadrillion or gazillion or whatever number, it's still insufficient because Krishna is Ananta, unlimited. So the next episode is entitled Satyabhama's Inferiority Complex. If you recall, when Krishna began this excursion, he had taken Satyabhama with him, and they rode on the back of Garuda. So now that the 2 demons were killed, Mura and Bauma Asura, the pastime continues. After this incident, Lord Krishna and Satyabhama entered Amaravati, the capital city of the heavenly planets, and they immediately entered the palace of King Indra and his wife, Sachi Devi, who welcomed them. Krishna then presented Indra the earrings of his mother, Aditi. So this was one of the reasons why Krishna had to kill Bauma Asura, because he had stolen several things from the Devatas. So this was one, the celebrated earrings of Aditi. But when Krishna and Satyabhama were returning from the capital city of Indra, Satyabhama remembered Krishna's promise to give her a parijata tree. So now, taking the opportunity of having come to the heavenly kingdom, Satyabhama uprooted a parijata tree and placed it on the back of Garuda. It seems previously Narada had once taken a parijata flower and had presented it to Krishna's senior wife, Sri Rukmini Devi. So on account of this, Satyabhama had developed an inferiority complex. So Satyabhama also wanted such a nice flower from Krishna. Of course, Krishna could understand the competitive womanly nature of his co-wives, and so Krishna smiled. Krishna then immediately asked Satyabhama, "Why are you asking for only one flower? I would like to give you a whole tree of parijata flowers." Actually, Krishna had purposely taken Satyabhama with him so that Satyabhama could collect the parijata with her own hand. But the denizens of the heavenly planets, including Indra, became very irritated because without permission, Satyabhama had uprooted a parijata tree, which was not to be found on the earth planet. So Indra, along with other demigods, offered opposition to Krishna and Satyabhama for their taking away the parijata tree. But in order to please Satyabhama, Krishna became determined and adamant. So now there was a fight between Indra, the demigods, and Krishna. But as usual, Krishna came out victorious because one of Krishna's names is Ajita, unconquerable. And so Krishna triumphantly brought the parijata tree chosen by Satyabhama down to this earthly plant and transplanted it in Dwaraka. After this, the tree was installed in the palace garden of Satyabhama, and on account of this extraordinary tree, the garden house of Satyabhama became extraordinarily beautiful. And as the parijata tree came down to the earthly planet, the fragrance of the parijata flower also came down, and the celestial drones or bees also migrated to this earth in search of its fragrance and honey. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This one is entitled A Sidebar on Indra. King Indra's behavior toward Krishna was not very much appreciated by great sages like Shukadeva Goswami, who was explaining this pastime to Raj Parikshit. Out of his causeless mercy, Krishna had gone to the heavenly kingdom, Amaravati, to present King Indra with his mother Aditi's earrings, which had been lost to Bauma Asura. And of course, Indra had been very glad to receive them. But when a parijata tree from the heavenly kingdom was taken by Krishna, Indra offered to fight with Krishna. So this was self-interest on the part of Indra. Indra had offered his prayer, tipping down his head to the lotus feet of Krishna. But as soon as Indra's purpose was served, Indradev became a different creature. And that is the way of the dealings of materialistic men. Materialistic men are always interested in their own profit. And for this purpose, they can offer any kind of respect to anyone. But when their personal interest is over, then they are no longer friends. This selfish nature is found not only among the rich class of men on this planet, but even in personalities like Indra and other demigods. Therefore, too much wealth makes a man selfish, and the selfish man is not prepared to take to Krishna consciousness. And so the selfish man is condemned by great devotees like Shukadeva Goswami. In other words, possession of too many worldly riches is a disqualification for advancement in Krishna consciousness. So one thing I would like to explain in this connection, something that Prabhupada repeatedly told us, his disciples, that Krishna will give the devotee all kinds of material facilities if the devotee has learned the art how to engage all of one's material assets in Krishna consciousness. Because Krishna is very protective of his devotee. So Krishna does not, if somebody surrenders to Krishna and decides, I want to be a devotee, then by such a sincere endeavor or sincere desire, then Krishna takes a personal interest in such a devotee. And Krishna does not want a surrendered devotee to get misled, to become diverted, and once again fall into Maya. So sometimes it appears that Krishna will take away one's material opulence if Krishna sees that the material opulence is an impediment or a distraction away from Krishna consciousness. But Prabhupada told us, if you learn how to use everything in Krishna's service, then yes, Krishna will give you more and more material facilities. So the trick is, whatever you have already been given by Krishna, everybody has already been given their due allowance from Krishna. Nobody's on the same level. So everyone is living according to Krishna's allowance. And Krishna is like a doting parent. Krishna will not give the struggling devotee or struggling child more material opulence if Krishna sees that it's not going to help the devotee. But if a devotee is mature, if a devotee is surrendered, and if a devotee is using everything in Krishna's service, then Krishna will give you more and more. Prabhupada once joked with us and chastised us. He said, Krishna could give you everything, the whole world, in less than 18 days. But what will you do with it? That is the question. Yes, Krishna is prepared to give everything to his devotee, but Krishna wants to see what he's already given you, are you using it completely? So that's my personal take on what we just heard from Prabhupada. That you use whatever you have been given, all your material assets, you use them to serve Krishna, Krishna will give you more. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, this one is entitled, Krishna and no one else is God. After defeating Indra, Krishna arranged to marry the 16,100 girls brought from the custody of Bauma Asura. By expanding himself into 16,100 equal forms, Krishna simultaneously married them all in different palaces in one auspicious moment. When each marriage was duly performed, the entire company of Krishna's relatives, including his mother Devaki, appeared in each and every palace and attended each and every wedding. So all these weddings took place simultaneously. This event was surely a manifestation of Krishna's achintya shakti, his inconceivable potency. And the greatest Vaishnava scholar, disciple of Lord Chaitanya, Jiva Goswami, he says that unless you understand or accept this fact that God has inconceivable potency, if this is not accepted, then one's understanding of God is deficient. It's not proper. This is fundamental to understanding what we mean by this word God. That God has to have inconceivable potency. And we have seen it time and time and time again throughout this Krishna book. Krishna danced with the gopis, manifested a form for each gopi. Here we just see Krishna married the 16,100 girls simultaneously, and all of the relatives and Krishna's mother was there simultaneously in each and every marriage that took place. We saw how Krishna, as 7-year-old boy, lifted the Govardhan hill and held it for 7 days, holding it by the pinky of his left hand. And we have seen incident after incident after incident, Krishna displaying his inconceivable potency. That is Godhead, achintya shakti, inconceivable potency. So on this particular occasion of Krishna manifesting his original form in each of his palaces, in other words, to take part in the wedding vows, Krishna manifested identical forms, technically known as prakash, in all the palaces. Krishna thus established the truth that Krishna and no one else is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is nothing impossible for Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna is all-powerful, omnipresent, and imperishable. And as such, actually, there is nothing wonderful in this pastime if you can understand that Krishna has achintya shakti, inconceivable potency. All the palaces of the more than 16,000 queens of Krishna were full with suitable gardens, furniture, and other paraphernalia, of which there is no parallel in this world. And there is no exaggeration in this history from Srimad Bhagavatam. The queens of Krishna were all expansions of the goddess of fortune, Lakshmiji. Technically, we have already learned from Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Prabhupada has explained it several times now in Krishna book, that just as Krishna is the origin of all other avatars, beginning with Balaram and Narayan and Ram and Nrsimha and all the Vishnu avatars and the Purusha avatars, Krishna is the origin. Then Srimati Radharani is the origin of all the Shaktis. So Radharani expands as the unlimited Gopi Gana. Krishna then expands as the queens of Dwaraka, and not Krishna, Radharani. Radharani expands as the gopis, as the queens, and Radharani then also further expands as the goddess of fortune, Lakshmiji. So just as Krishna is the origin, Radharani is the origin of all the Shaktis. Krishna lived with his 16,108 queens each in her own palace, and Krishna treated them exactly the same way an ordinary man treats his wife. We should always remember that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, was playing exactly like a human being. That is the meaning of lila or pastime, playing. Although Krishna showed his extraordinary opulences by simultaneously marrying more than 16,000 queens in more than 16,000 palaces, Krishna behaved with them just like an ordinary man. But Krishna strictly followed the relationship between husband and wife required in ordinary homes, following the Vedic principles. In other words, when it says that Krishna behaved with them just like an ordinary man, don't misunderstand that Krishna behaved with his wives like a rude, proud, puffed up, demanding, obstinate husband. No, not that kind of ordinary human man. No. Just like Ram, Lord Ramachandra, was the ideal king. So this is how to understand when Prabhupada says, behave with them just like an ordinary man, meaning Krishna behaved just like an ordinary man who strictly follows the Vedic rules and regulations. Krishna was always at home except for when Krishna had to go out to do ordinary household duties. Therefore, it is very difficult to understand the characteristics of the Absolute Truth, the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why? Even demigods like Lord Brahma are unable to probe into the transcendental pastimes of Krishna. Yes, you might recall that after the pastime of Brahma stealing the cowherder boys and calves, after everything was finished, and after Brahma offered his prayers begging forgiveness, Brahma said, "Someone may say they know something or everything about Krishna. As far as I am concerned, I don't understand anything about Krishna." The wives of Krishna were so fortunate that they got the Supreme Personality of Godhead as their husband, although their husband's personality was not unknown even to demigods like Lord Brahma. In their dealings as husband and wife, Krishna and his queens would smile, talk, joke, embrace, and so on, and their conjugal relationship ever increasingly developed. In this way, Krishna and the queens enjoyed transcendental happiness in their household life. So this is another way of explaining what Prabhupada meant when he said that Krishna behaved with his wives like an ordinary human being. See here, Krishna would smile, he would talk, he would joke, embrace. In other words, intimately. Although each and every queen had thousands of maidservants engaged for her service, the queens were all personally attentive in serving Krishna. Each of the queens used to receive Krishna personally when Krishna would enter the palace. The queens engaged in seating Krishna on a nice couch, worshiping Krishna with all kinds of paraphernalia, washing Krishna's lotus feet with Ganges water, offering Krishna betel nuts, and massaging Krishna's legs. In this way, the queens gave Krishna relief from the transcendental fatigue Krishna supposedly felt after being away from home. The queens saw that they would fan Krishna nicely. They would offer Krishna fragrant essential flower oil, decorate Krishna with flower garlands, dress Krishna's hair, ask Krishna to lie down to take rest, bathe Krishna personally, and feed Krishna palatable dishes. Each queen did all these things herself and did not wait for the maidservants. In other words, Krishna and his different queens displayed on this earth an ideal household life. So here also, not only do we see how Krishna behaved like an ideal ordinary man, here also the queens also behaved with Krishna like a first-class Vedic wife. All these services that are mentioned here that they did. Later, towards the end of Krishna book, we will hear the pastime of Krishna and the queens of Dwaraka going to Kurukshetra to observe the solar eclipse. And at the same time, the residents of Vrindavan also went to Kurukshetra. So after years and years and years and years, there was finally a reunion of Krishna with the residents of Vrindavan. And at that time, which we will read later on, there was a nice conversation between Draupadi and the queens. Draupadi frankly asked the queens, "Can you please tell me how it is that you married Krishna?" Because Draupadi from birth was very attached and attracted and devoted to Krishna. That's why one of her names is Krishna. She is totally devoted to Krishna. So she was very curious how they got the fortune of marrying Krishna. And in each and every case, beginning with the 8 principal queens and the 16,100 represented by the chief queen Rohini, all of them said, yes, although we are wives of Krishna, although Krishna is our husband, we see ourselves as Krishna's humble maidservant. So that is very instructive. Even though they're the queen of Krishna, Krishna's wife, each of them was thinking, I'm not really his wife, I'm simply Krishna's maidservant. Humility, humility, humility. This is the symptom of a great devotee. Since in each of the Vaikuntha planets, Lord Narayan enjoys with only one goddess of fortune. In other words, each Vaikuntha planet is presided by Lord Narayan. Still, Lord Narayan on each planet only has one goddess of fortune. But in Dwaraka, Krishna enjoys with thousands of queens. Therefore, Dwaraka must be considered superior to Vaikuntha. Just as Vasudev, Dwarakadish, is the Lord of Dwarka, he is a plenary expansion of the supremely Purna Bhagavan, complete Lord of Sri Vrindavan. So Krishna is the ultimate. So Krishna's principal queens are full expansions of Krishna's supremely complete pleasure potencies, the gopis, who are expansions of the Kladini potency of Krishna, represented as Srimati Radharani. At that place, 16,000 gopis were assembled with Krishna, who is considered the supreme, the supersoul, the shelter of all living beings. These gopis are Krishna's renowned 16 potencies. Krishna is like the moon, and the gopis are like the moon's phases. And the full contingent of gopis is like the full sequence of the moon's 16 phases. Each of these 16 divisions of gopis is subdivided into 1,000 parts. Therefore, you get 16,100 queens who are expansions of the gopis. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.